June 6, 1944. Before the sun has risen over Normandy, the largest invasion force ever assembled is already moving through the darkness. Thousands of ships, millions of men, one coastline. In the next 24 hours, the fate of Europe will be decided on 5 stretches of French sand. This is the story of D-Day and the liberation of a continent. By the summer of 1944, Nazi Germany had ruled Western Europe for 4 long years. From the North Cape of Norway to the border of Spain, Hitler's empire seemed unbreakable. But across the Channel, in the ports and fields of southern England, the Allies had been preparing a blow unlike any in history. They called it Operation Overlord. Under the command of American General Dwight Eisenhower, it would be the largest amphibious invasion ever attempted. Nothing was left to chance. Millions of tons of supplies, thousands of aircraft, detailed models of every beach, every seawall, every farmhouse, and everything depended on 2 things the Allies could not control: the tides and the weather. A single storm in the Channel could turn the invasion into a massacre. To hide the blow, the Allies built an army of ghosts, inflatable rubber tanks, fake radio traffic, entire phantom divisions, commanded on paper by General George Patton. It was all designed to convince Hitler that the real attack would come at the Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the Channel, not Normandy. Against all odds, the deception held. Even as the ships set sail, the German High Command was still looking the wrong way. It began in the dark. Hours before the first landing craft touched the sand, more than 18,000 Allied paratroopers dropped from the night sky behind enemy lines. The American 82nd and 101st Airborne scattered across the fields of the Cotentin Peninsula. Many landed far from their targets, alone in the darkness, surrounded by the enemy. Some drowned in flooded marshes under the weight of their equipment. In the town of Sainte-Mère-Église, terrified villagers watched paratroopers descend into the streets. To the east, British airborne troops seized a vital bridge over the Caen Canal in a daring glider assault, holding it against fierce counterattacks. Scattered, outnumbered, and confused, the airborne troops did exactly what they were meant to do. They cut the roads, they seized the crossings, and they spread chaos through the German rear, so that when dawn came, no one knew where the real blow would fall. Out at sea, the greatest fleet in history was taking its position. Nearly 7,000 vessels stretched from horizon to horizon, more ships than the eye could count. As the first grey light touched the water, the battleships opened fire, a wall of steel and thunder crashing down on the French coast, throwing up geysers of sand and smoke. Overhead, waves of bombers pounded the German defenses. And below, in thousands of small landing craft pitching in the cold grey swell, a generation of young men crouched shoulder to shoulder, soaked and seasick, waiting for the ramps to drop. Many were teenagers, most had never seen combat. Ahead of them lay the most heavily defended coastline on Earth. 5 beaches, 5 code names: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, Sword. Along 50 miles of coast, the Allies came ashore all at once. On most of the beaches, the landings went better than anyone had dared to hope. At Utah, the Americans pushed inland against light resistance. On the British and Canadian beaches, tanks and infantry fought their way over the seawall and into the villages beyond. But on one beach, the plan fell apart. Omaha. Here, the German defenses were untouched by the bombardment. High bluffs overlooked the sand, lined with concrete bunkers, machine gun nests, and artillery. As the ramps dropped, German guns opened fire into the packed landing craft. Men were cut down before they even reached the water. Others drowned or lay pinned behind steel obstacles as the tide rose around the wounded. For hours, Omaha hung by a thread, the sand littered with the fallen, the survivors trapped at the water's edge. And then, in ones and twos, they began to move. Small groups of men, leaderless and afraid, climbed the bluffs under fire and silenced the guns, one by one. By the end of that terrible day, Omaha had been won, at a cost that would never be forgotten. By nightfall on June 6th, over 150,000 Allied troops were ashore. But a foothold is not a victory. To hold Normandy and win the campaign, the Allies had to land everything an army needed: men, tanks, fuel, ammunition and food, across open beaches in the face of the enemy. So they brought their harbors with them. Two vast artificial ports, codenamed Mulberry, were towed across the channel in pieces and assembled off the coast. Through them poured an endless river of supplies. Day by day, the beachhead grew, deeper and stronger, while the Germans, still convinced the main attack was yet to come, hesitated to commit their reserves. Time was running out for the defenders of Normandy, but beyond the beaches, the Allies met a new enemy, the land itself. This was the bocage, the ancient farm country of Normandy, divided for centuries into small fields walled in by thick earthen hedgerows. Every field became a fortress, every sunken lane a perfect ambush. Tanks that tried to climb the hedgerows exposed their thin underbellies to German guns. Progress was measured in yards and paid for in blood. Around the city of Caen, a key objective meant to fall on the very first day, the battleground on for weeks. Frustration grew among the Allied commanders. But the brutal fighting was bleeding the German army white, grinding down divisions that could never be replaced. Then, at the end of July, the Americans struck. Operation Cobra opened with a firestorm, hundreds of heavy bombers carpeting the German front line until it simply ceased to exist. Through the gap poured the Allied armies, and suddenly the War of Inches became a war of movement. Armored columns raced across France. The German defense collapsed into chaos. Tens of thousands of German soldiers were caught in a shrinking trap near the town of Falaise, pounded from the air and the ground until the roads were choked with the wreckage of a broken army, burned-out tanks, dead horses, and abandoned guns, stretching for miles. The Battle of Normandy was over. The road to Paris lay open. On August 25, 1944, Paris was free. As the French resistance rose up inside the city, the tanks of General Leclerc's Free French Division rolled through the street, followed by the Americans, and Paris exploded with joy. Crowds flooded the boulevards. Flowers rained down from the windows. Church bells rang out across the city for the first time in 4 years. The next day, General Charles de Gaulle walked down the Champs-Élysées through a sea of his own people. After more than 1,500 days of occupation, the City of Light belonged to France once more. From Paris, the Allies surged eastward, liberating town after town, village after village, welcomed everywhere by people who had waited years for this moment. For a few heady weeks, it seemed the war might be over by Christmas, but the German army, though beaten in France, was not yet destroyed. As the Allies approached the border of the Reich itself, their supply lines stretched thin, and the enemy's resistance began to stiffen. Ahead lay the cold forests of the German frontier, and a long, hard winter of fighting still to come. The liberation of Western Europe came at a staggering price. In the fields, the hedgerows, and the beaches of Normandy, tens of thousands of young men gave their lives. Today they rest in silent rows of white crosses on the cliffs above Omaha Beach, looking out over the sand where it all began. D-Day was more than a battle. It was the turning point in the West, the day the tide of the Second World War in Europe truly, finally turned. From that fragile foothold on the coast of France, the Allies would march all the way to Berlin. That the Third Reich was not yet finished. Ahead lay the desperate German counterattack in the frozen Ardennes, the great crossing of the Rhine, and the final battle for Germany itself. The fall of the Third Reich. Next time,